Hey, welcome back to the stash. It's over! It's finally over! After like, 3 years of constant frustration, confusion, anger, and just pure disbelief, the Amazing Spider-Man volume has finally reached its end, and honestly, it doesn't even feel real. This run has dragged on for so long, felt so disconnected and so drawn out, that part of me thought it would never actually end. I mean, month after month, issue after issue, we kept coming back for these videos, hoping for something to change and hoping for something to maybe click. But it never did. And sadly, it probably never will with Spider-Man comics with Nick Lowe in charge. I mean, God, Peter, you should have listened to your wife. You know, I think the worst part was that this wasn't just a poor stretch of Spider-Man comics. We've had those before, you know, like the bad stories, the moments in time that pissed us, the fans, off. But at least those were just parts of a larger run. But this was a whole damn volume, an entire era built on vague mysteries that led nowhere, relationships that meant nothing, and character choices that felt like a parody. For myself, and I'm sure millions of others, this wasn't just a misfire, this was a complete insult to the legacy of the Amazing Spider-Man. I mean, from day one, it practically regressed the character by over a decade. Peter Parker once again didn't feel like Peter Parker. The world around him didn't feel like how it was supposed to. The stakes didn't feel earned, and worst of all, there was no emotional core holding it together. It became a comic defined by what it wasn't. It wasn't fun, it wasn't dramatic in a meaningful way, it wasn't funny, clever, or heartfelt. It didn't feel like a celebration of Spider-Man's 60+ year history. But instead, it felt like a weird, detached, alternate universe where no one involved actually liked the character. And yet we kept slugging through each release. Mostly thanks to Ultimate Spider-Man keeping us all sane. We could have had something special. Like seriously, the setup Nick Spencer gave Spider-Man was incredible. Sins Past was reversed and One More Day was almost finally broken. But instead we got whatever the hell this is. And now to end this shit show with the 8 deaths of Spider-Man, a supposed climax that's somehow both over the top and hollow, a magic-filled sensory overload that completely ignores the grounded tone of the rest of the run, a rushed last-ditch attempt to end things with a bang, but somehow still managing to feel like a whimper. It all just feels like a complete waste of time. I mean, this is it. The final chapter in what I genuinely believe is the worst volume of The Amazing Spider-Man ever published. A run so baffling, so tone-deaf, that it didn't just miss the point. It actively dismantled the very foundation of who Spider-Man is supposed to be. And even though this new release was nowhere near as bad as the previous ones we've gotten over the course of 2 years, it's still nowhere near close enough for the quality Amazing Spider-Man comics should have. And so join us today as we go over the last entry of this godforsaken volume, The Amazing Spider-Man issue 70. Before we get into that though, I want to take a quick second to say that here at The Stash, we're trying to reach 10,000 subscribers before the end of the month. It's a huge ask, but with your help, I know we can do it. So if you like Spider-Man or just comic content in general, feel free to stick around and maybe hit that subscribe button. But anyway, with all that being said, let's jump right back into the video. Spider-Man in this absolutely disgusting Juggernaut suit sends CALLIX'S flying back down to Earth with a crushing blow. However, mentally, Peter admits that even with all his power, there are things that can still stop him. Things such as the pain of loss, the feeling that life is meaningless, the feeling of fear. He knows this because it did stop him. He gave up, but he swears it's something he'll never do again. Now, thanks to the impact CALLIX suffered, it seems that the effects of the Blight have managed to disappear from those infected. And after Spidey goes to check in on the X-Men, they redirect their focus and strategy. Due to Spider-Man getting rid of the soul rot terrorizing everyone, CALLIX is now the X-Men's priority, whereas Spidey has to face the Blight itself. And so with everyone watching on with bated breath, Spider-Man lunges in with extreme force, sending himself all the way straight to the Blight. Meanwhile, in the Crimson Cosmos, CYRA speaks to her father who still sits on his throne unmoved, but this time, he has a saddened expression. She explains that she traded her immortality in order to save the Earth's champion, Spider-Man. But her father has a bigger question on his mind. He wonders why is he so immobilized, indecisive, and confused. CYRA admits that she too has been asking that very same question since meeting Spider-Man, and then explains the concept that we humans call grief. Yet the mere mention of it sends CYTTORAK into a fury as he declares nothing can hurt him. But CYRA stands firm and gives her father a much needed wake-up call, and plants the seed for change within CYTTORAK's mind. We then go back to see Spider-Man floating before the Blight. He recounts how Doctor Strange figured out a way to hide their entire dimension from it, but it took the power of a god, and so using his newfound power, he plans to sacrifice himself to cast the casket of CYTTORAK continuously until he perishes. But then CYTTORAK himself appears, calling his efforts futile, explaining how eventually the Blight will succeed, but Spider-Man doesn't budge. In fact, he tells CYTTORAK to leave if he won't help. This makes him grow more curious. He asks Spider-Man why does he continue to fight when life is so fragile? Spider-Man then tells CYTTORAK about the beauty in that fragility, how every life is like that, and most of all how today matters, how today is worth fighting for. This speech changes something in CYTTORAK. It allows that seed in which CYRA planted to fully grow. And so without hesitation, he shoves Spidey out of the way and takes his place. For if a mere human can act in the face of loss, so can CYTTORAK. This results in him becoming the Crimson Casket that shields the world and dimension from the Blight. He promises to protect his remaining children and this world, and declares this, the new Covenant. And so our story and this volume ends with the funeral of Kenneth McCary, the man that Spider-Man saved at the beginning of this story. And as the proceedings take place, we see things slowly shift back to normal, from CALLIX'S being incarcerated to Peter making amends with those he loves in his life, setting up the brand new issue 1 of The Amazing Spider-Man. And so this marks the end of the absolute worst Spider-Man run in the character's 60+ year history. And like I said before, sure we've had god-awful stories before, like One More Day, Since Past, the Mackie and Byrne run, and so much more, but what's impressive about this comic here is that it wasn't just a particular storyline that was complete and utter trash, but rather it was the entire fucking volume. And wow, like for what's meant to be a big climactic ending to the series, talk about such a forgettable story. Like, I literally went off to have some food before writing this video after reading the issue, and I genuinely couldn't remember much of all of what actually happened in the story. But maybe that was the point? Maybe even the Spidey office, as incompetent as they are, knew that Zeb's run was so universally hated, so unbelievably insulting, that they realized they had to finish off the volume with a quick, completely out of left field story to get over to the next volume. I mean, a quick story that stretched out for like 10 issues. Whatever. Hell, even with it all finally done, the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man just feels so out of place. I found this run to be a pretty heavily grounded street-level base comic, save for the Rabin shit. But then here it's just a complete magic sensory overload. Either way, I'm just glad it's done. I mean, nothing in this issue was offensively bad or anything. In fact, the last few pages were actually pretty decent. The real problem is that Kelly writes this like he's crafted something profound, like this arc was supposed to say something meaningful or reinvent the Spider-Man mythos, but it didn't. It was literally just Peter spiraling into depression for a few issues, then randomly snapping out of it like nothing happened. It all just kind of feels hollow, you know? Like, it's trying really hard to be deep, but it never earns it. Things just happen and then things just stop happening. And even when taking a step back and trying to really think about the story as a whole after it's been completed, it just feels like one big dragged out mess with a couple of okay to good moments placed few and far between. I wasn't invested in the slightest with this story. It left me feeling empty and as if it was a complete chore to read. Flipping each page felt like staring at the clock during school, painfully waiting for the hand to tick over the next minute. And sadly, there's not much here in this arc that gives me confidence in Kelly's run moving forward. Could he potentially write a good Spider-Man run? Yeah, sure, there's always a chance, but with Nick Lowe still in charge, I just seriously doubt that anything is really going to change. And that's the tragedy of it all, isn't it? Because deep down I, and I'm sure you, would love to love these books. I want to be excited about Spider-Man again. But when Marvel keeps handing the keys to people who either don't understand the character, or worse, just simply don't care, it makes you just feel tired. Tired of hoping and waiting for the books to be good again. But I also want to say that for as bad as this series was, for as much pain as it gave me and so many of you as Spider-Man fans, I'll always forever be grateful for what it led to, because this run, as awful as it was, gave me the chance to interact with so many of you. It brought us together, it gave us a shared frustration to rally around, and at the same time, it allowed this channel to grow in ways I never imagined. And so as we get closer to 10,000 subscribers, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for watching, for commenting, for sticking around through all the rants and rambles, but most importantly, thank you for making my dreams come true. You know, I feel like I'm missing something. Let me just quickly flip through the comic one last time. Oh god, not Paul.